What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and in today's episode of the fighting game tutorial series, we are going to be going over joining online sessions. So I'm going to set my number of players to 2 and launch these as standalone games so that I can get the result that I want. This is going to simulate us playing as 2 players, and we are going to show you how to host and join a session. So we already have the hosting down in previous episodes, but now we're going to be able to actually connect to that session once we've searched and found other available sessions. So once I come in here, I can go into the online mode and I can go to host on one of them. So online, host. You'll see the log has popped up. This session is hosting a session. And now this instance is going to join that session. So we're going to hit join and we have to scroll down to the correct session. So for me, it's at the bottom because in the previous episode, we added a bunch of entries to test out scrolling behavior and things like that. So I'm going to scroll down to my bottom element. This is the session ID. If I hit the confirm button on this, I'm going to attempt to join the session. Once we do that, you'll get a log and it says join result 0. 0 is success in Unreal's terms. We'll go over this later in the episode, but that means we succeeded. If I press confirm again on the session, I will get join result 5. And that means that there was an error with the session, and this is because I've already tried to join the session. I'm trying to join it again while I'm already in it, and that's not going to work. So even though we can't really see anything yet, we are in fact being able to join a session today. One quick note before we get started, guys. If you want to get caught up in the series and check out all the cool stuff we've done, from hitboxes to the animations to the online system, you can click a link right here in the top right corner to go to the entire fighting game playlist. Alternatively, if you don't care about that and you just care about the online play, I'll link you to the first episode of online play right here, which was hosting sessions. I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube membership and Patreon supporters, and now the new Discord supporters. Thank you guys so much for the love and support. I really appreciate you. It is a wonderful community we have, and I am so incredibly happy that you guys are enjoying this series and these series, so thank you so much. With all that out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. And we are going to need to work in the session list and the main menu screen widgets today. Let's go ahead and open them up. So blueprints, widgets, menus. I have my session list widget, which is this one right here, where it's the sessions with all the names of the sessions. And the main menu screen, which is the default main menu widget that we have. Let's start in the session list and let's go to the graph. The first thing I want to do with the session list is to add the event confirm and event back buttons. So we are using this widget navigation interface to move on the session list. The widget navigation interface is a code class that we have here, and it has things like move up, move down, confirm, back, and any key. This is so we can implement any of these actions using the same inputs. So if we include this interface or we utilize this interface on a widget, we can track all these inputs without having to listen for them specifically. We've already implemented this in the previous episode of the session list. However, we only did move up and move down. Now that we're going to be able to actually join sessions, we need at least the confirm. I'm going to add the back while we're here as well. So no changes are required in here. Let's go back to the widget. And you see I have event move up and event move down. Well, I've added event back where my on press back button was. So I had this back button that was getting the game mode, clearing the session list reference, removing this widget from the parent, and then I've added some additional behavior afterward as well that we'll get into in a few minutes. But on this button, I want to do the same behavior if we just press the back button. So on my Xbox controller, that is the B button. On my keyboard, that is the backspace button. This is just a friendly little thing to help us be able to get out of this menu more easily so we don't have to go down to the button or we don't have to use our mouse to press the button. To find this, by the way, all you have to do is type event back and it should come up. You'll see that the target is the widget navigation interface, but if you're having trouble with it for any reason, you can also search for widget navigation interface and it will show you the events that are available to grab. You don't want to grab these calls here because this will actually call the back event or function, but it does give you the list so you can search up the proper name if you're having any trouble. Now after that, let's add the confirm event. So I put mine down here. Now this one we did not have at all. So I'm going to type event confirm. And it's the one from my widget navigation interface. So that is this event right here. So when we press the confirm button, which is the 1 button on my keyboard or the A button on my Xbox controller, I want to attempt to join that session. Now, the session list has all these session list elements in it. So remember I mentioned earlier that the new sessions that pop up load in at the bottom because I have all these temp sessions here. You can do a few things. First of all, you can clear these. You can get rid of these temporary sessions that we had from the previous videos. Since these session list elements pop in as we find sessions, it's fine to not have any here initially. I had added these here so we could test the scrolling behavior as well as the navigating this menu behavior. However, if you'd like to keep them, that's fine. Just know that we have to scroll down to the session that has the actual ID on it. If it doesn't have the ID on it, we won't be able to select that session because that's actually just a fake session list element that we have added. It's not one that was populated from the code logic. But long story short, say that this is our session that we want to attempt to join. When we press the confirm button on it, we want to call this event. And so to actually perform the logic properly, we have to determine what index the character was on, and then grab the information from that session list element, then try and join the session based off of that. Right now, our logic for this is very simple because we don't really have multiple sessions in progress. We only are creating one session at the current time and joining that one. We're going to still set it up the correct way though. We're just not going to use all the information from the session list element to actually try and join the session. We're only going to use a very limited amount. Once we get that working, we can improve this in further episodes by making it more advanced and using more of the data. First thing we need to do is figure out what index we're on. So we need our sessions vertical box. That is this container that holds all the session list elements. So I can do sessions VB and get that. Then I can drag off of it and type get all children. So every session list element is going to be in this array that gets returned. And we can type get a copy. And using move up and move down the events that we made when navigating this list, we actually track the current index that we're on. And we can use that to determine what session the player is pressing confirm on. This is because the index in an array starts at 0, and the child element in this container starts at 0. So this very top one is index 0, next one is index 1, so on and so forth. And so the array is in the same order as the session vertical box. So easily enough, we can just use the current index variable we have and pass that into the get. That's what we've got here. Now, this result that we get is just a widget, but we want to cast it and make sure we grab it as a session list element. First of all, if there's anything in this container that's not a session list element, we don't want to use it as the session to try to join. But even if we're 100% positive it's a session list element, we still want to cast to it so that we can grab the data off of it, such as the session name. We're actually going to leave this alone for now. We're just making sure that this is a session list element right now. When we get into more advanced logic with being able to determine the names of each session and filtering through multiple sessions based on parameters, you'll see what we can do with this. But we want to leave this here and just make sure that we clicked on some session list element for this very first episode, and that will be good enough. And by the way, to do this, you just drag off the get and type cast to session list element. Now, only if the cast succeeds, we want to keep going forward, and we want to get our game instance and cast it to the base game instance. Because if this succeeds, we want to call a function that we're going to make today, join session. So we're going to do get game instance and cast it to the base game instance. And we'll drag the line to this cast, and then only if this cast succeeds, we'll call our join session function, but we don't have that created yet. So we're going to leave this right like this for now. Let's go into the code and let's go to the base game instance. That is where we do our online logic, and that's where we're going to add join session. So let's go into base game instance.h and let's scroll down to where we want to add our function. And I added it alongside the rest of my online functions. So I have void join session, and I made sure it is U function blueprint callable. That way we can call it when we press the confirm on a session from the session list. I've done more in this file than just join session, but we're not going to worry about that just yet. We do have to fill out the join session, or at least create it in the CPP. That way we can call it in the blueprint. So let's go ahead and create it. We won't go over all the logic right now. I'm scrolling down to where I want to create join session. And it looks like this: void ubase game instance, : join session, and then you need your brackets. Of course, we're going to go over everything in this function, but let's do that in a few minutes. Once you have this function created, we can go back to the editor. Make sure you relaunch if you're running the editor through Visual Studio like I am, and get that function able to be called from the blueprint. So go back into your session list, drag off your base game instance, and call join session. Now, once you do that, you'll have this node right here. It won't do anything yet in your project, but now the confirm is set up. Basically, we determine what selection the player has navigated to, and then attempt to join that session. Remember, the cast to the session list element isn't really being used for anything yet, so we're just going to call the join session function, and it's going to be more of a manual process. But as this gets more advanced, we will obviously use this element that we retrieved to determine the exact session name and ID to join. Alright, now that join session is ready to go, and we're actually calling it when we press the confirm button, there's one other thing I want to take care of before we get into that, and that is related to the extra stuff in the back button functions and events here. So I have some logic here to determine what the creator widget was and set a variable on it. This happens because if we come into the game and we go to online and join, technically the main menu is still open in the background. This is actually completely fine, but the problem is now if we press confirm on the session list, it's going to be confirming options on the main menu. And specifically, it's going to be confirming the option for the online join button. And if we do that, then it's going to keep trying to do the search again instead of actually joining the session that we want to join. So that's not what we want to do. We want to either block input using a boolean on the main menu if the online session list is open, or we want to do something like stop listening for inputs on the main menu. Either way is perfectly acceptable. We've done both throughout the series. I'm going to use the boolean today because it's quite simple to add for this scenario. So let's go back into our session list one more time, and you'll see at the bottom I've added a new variable today. So you can press plus variable to add a new one, and I've called it the creator widget, and I made it class widget, just standard widget. So widget, object reference. So this is the creator widget because we might be able to spawn the session list from several places. You'll be able to spawn the session list from the main menu, but maybe at the end of an online match, you can select an option to go back to the session list or something like that, and you might not want to spawn the main menu at that point. You could make this a main menu screen widget if you want, because that's all we're using it for right now. But if you keep it a parent class like widget, you do have a little bit more freedom if you want to spawn it from other places. Regardless though, I've made this instance editable and expose on spawn. This way, when we create this session list widget on the main menu screen, we can pass the main menu screen that created it into the session list. This variable will be filled out right away correctly. And so at that point, when we know that the widget is open, we can say the session list is open. And when we close this widget, we can say the session list is closed. So after you've created this widget, let's go to the main menu screen and let's go to the graph. We want to go to the variable list and we want to make a new variable is session list open. So plus variable is session list open. It is a boolean. I have a few other of these boolean types in here. We have online submenu, is settings menu, is quick game up. So it's very similar process to that. This new one is session list open is what we're focusing on today. So let's go to the confirm selection button. And now at the start, we had a branch that was checking if quick game was up or the settings menu was up. If either of these were up, we didn't want to do the behavior in confirm selection. We wanted to focus on the quick game menu or the settings menu, and we're going to do the same for the session list. So I want to hit add pin on this OR and add our new boolean is session list open and have all three of those things checked. Now, if the session list is not open, we'll be able to go into this behavior and index 1, when the online submenu is open, is the join session. So I can follow index 1 to right here, and we say the online submenu not open is false because the online submenu is open in this case. So we want to go into here where we call search for sessions, and we are creating the session list widget. At this point, if we refresh this node, so right click, refresh node, you should get a creator widget variable here. This is because in the session list, we made our creator widget instance editable and expose on spawn. So at this point, we are able to see it and set it when creating the widget. In the creator widget, we should pass in self since we are spawning it from the main menu screen and we want the main menu to be the creator. So we can right click and say get reference to self. And this will give us this little node here. We plug that into the creator widget to say that this is the creator. And now lastly, at the end of this logic, after we add the sessions list widget, we want to set our new boolean is session list open to be true. Because at this point, we've already opened it, so we can just set it to true right in this logic. So is session list open, set, check it to make it true. And now this is all the logic that we have in the main menu screen for setting that to be true. Before we leave the main menu screen, we'll also want to go to the move selection function in here and add the is session list open to that because we don't want to be moving around in the main menu when the session list is open, just like we didn't want to be confirming on the main menu. So again, I already had an OR with the is quick game up and is settings menu open. I just pressed add pin to add another section here to pass in the is session list open, and I passed it in. So now we won't be able to move or confirm things on the main menu if the session list is open. Now we can return to the session list, and specifically we'll go to the back events. So everything up to this point was already covered in the previous episodes of the session list, but after that is all new. So now when we are exiting the session list, I want to check to see if the creator widget is valid. And if it is, I want to disable the is session list open boolean, set it to false, because it's no longer open. We're closing the session list at this point. To do this, I grab the creator widget and get it, and then I right click on it and convert it to a validated get. That way I can make sure it's valid before using it. Then I drag off of it and cast it to the type that I think it is. So I believe it's going to be the main menu screen because that's the only one that we've set up so far. But you may have to add other checks in here if you do add the ability to go to this screen from multiple other menus or places in the game. But we're going to cast it to the main menu screen, and that has the boolean is session list open. We want to set that, and we want to leave it as false because it is no longer open at this point. We've closed it, and that's what we have here. At this point, we should have full navigation over our session list and main menu screen without any issues between the two of them. So now we can go into actually joining the session. We're already calling the function onConfirm, but we need to fill out this behavior. So let's go back into the code, and let's actually go into the base game instance.h and make the rest of our variables before we get into the functions. So I'm scrolling down to my join session function again. That is right here. And I have join session, and then I have join session completed. This is very similar to search for sessions and search for sessions completed. And the reason we have this join session completed is because when we start joining the session, that is the attempt to join the session, that has to go through all the steps of actually making the connection. And so we can either add a loading symbol or tell the player that we're attempting to join that session. But join session completed is when we can actually move the player to that server, to that connection, or get them in a room together. Or if the session fails, this will also be called, and so we'll know that it failed. But until the join session completed is called, we can't know what to do with our players and with our network connection. So basically, join session starts the joining process, and join session completed finishes the joining process. Now, I've also added two variables for today's episode, and they are also very similar to the variables that we added for the search for sessions. So we have a search for sessions completed delegate and a search for sessions completed handle. Those were created in a previous episode, but now I've added the join session completed delegate and the join session completed handle. We're going to use them for very, very similar cases, but I'll go over them fully in this episode regardless. I'm just showing you the similarities between these. So if you've been following my episodes on the online play, you should kind of know what they're going to be used for. Now, this function, void join session completed, has two parameters, and it has an fname session name. This is the name that is returned to this function when join session is completed. So once it completes, it returns the name of the session that it has attempted to join. And then it returns this on join session complete result, type, and I'm calling it join result here. So basically it will tell you if it failed or succeeded, and if it failed, it might tell you why it failed. This on join session complete result just stands for enum on join session complete result. So we can actually right click and go to the definition and you can see the values of it. So this is the namespace, this is the enum type, and we have success, session is full, session does not exist, could not retrieve address, already in session, or unknown error. Again, this is not something I created. This is the default Unreal Engine behavior and code for this, but we can use this value to know what happened when we tried to join the session, whether we were successful or unsuccessful. So the first one is f on join session complete delegate, and it is a variable type that already exists within Unreal. We don't have to add it or do anything like that. We just have to put in this type as the variable, and you can call it whatever you want. I called it join session completed delegate. Then we need the handle for that delegate, and that is the f delegate handle. All the delegate handles are going to be the same type because the delegate handles can handle any delegate, but these delegates themselves are specific types because they have certain information, certain things you can do on them. So these have to be certain types, but the handles are always going to be f delegate handle. And I've called this one the join session completed handle. At this point, we have all of our variables and functions that we need to perform the join session. So let's go into base game instance.cpp. And before we fill out join session, let's scroll up to the top. Let's go to the constructor of base game instance, and we want to set up our join session completed delegate the same way we set up the search for sessions completed delegate. So remember what a delegate is. It's an object that is going to be used to call another event or another function once a certain condition is reached. It could be a timer running out. It could be an operation has finished. We need to tell our delegate that we want to call the join session completed function once the operation we gave it finishes. But to do that, the variable itself, the delegate itself, needs to know what function it's going to be calling when that operation finishes. And that's what we're doing here. We're setting up the function to call. So we're going to say join session completed delegate, and we're going to set it equal to f on join session complete delegate, create U object, because we're making a new one. We need the in user object and the in function. So basically the object that we're going to be calling this on and the function we're going to be calling. We're going to be calling it on this. So quite literally, we're going to put in the keyword this, and it stands for this instance of the base game instance, comma, ampersand u base game instance, and the name of the function that we want to call. So we are going to set this delegate to call the function once the join session behavior has finished, and we're going to call join session completed once it has finished. So we want the delegate to call join session completed. Now that the delegate is ready and it knows what it's supposed to do, we have to go to join session and actually fill out the behavior to make it do that. So here's my join session function. In here, we're going to start out just like everything else with the online play. So we are going to check and make sure that we have the online subsystem. So we're going to say if I online subsystem pointer, and I'm calling it online subsystem, equals I online subsystem, get, parentheses. So basically, if we can retrieve the online subsystem from Unreal, then this variable will be filled out with the data for it. If we can't, we don't want to try and join the session or we'll cause a crash. So we're going to go ahead and just skip this behavior. But assuming we can get the online subsystem, we're good to go inside this if statement, and then we'll go to this next one right here. Now we want to grab the online session interface, because the online session interface is what can do things like try to attempt to join a session, and so we very much need this to do what we're trying to do. And so we're going to do another if statement, I online session pointer. It's a type that exists within Unreal, and I'm calling it the online session interface. And I want to set this equal to the online subsystem, arrow, get session interface. If this if statement goes through, that means that the online session interface was successfully grabbed and we can do things with it. If not, we don't want to do anything because we're not able to connect or reach the online session interface, so we don't want to try and do things that are going to cause a crash or cause errors later on. This next set of logic is going to be the correct behavior that we want, but it's going to be a little bit hard-coded. I'll explain this as we get into it, but just know we can only connect to a certain session with the name My Game Session right now, because when we hosted a session, we did not provide a unique name. We just gave it the name My Game Session, and so we have to connect to that very specific one. Don't worry, of course we're going to change this and update this. This is just the most basic way that we can do it for now, and we want to make sure that the join session is working before making it more complicated. Now the first thing I'm doing here is grabbing my first local player from controller. The reason we do this is because the uLocalPlayer type has something called getPreferredUniqueNetID, and we can pass this directly into join session for the local user ID parameter that we need, and this is the ID of the player searching for a match. So if we are able to grab the local player, then we will be able to pass that in directly, so this is important. We did the same thing for hosting a session as well. So I'm just saying constant uLocalPlayer pointer, and I'm calling it local player, and I'm setting it equal to getWorld get first local player from controller. Since we only have the one session that we can join, I'm not passing the specific index that the player pressed confirm on to the join session. Not yet. We're just calling it directly on the first index available in the search settings. So remember, in the previous episodes for searching, we were filling out this search settings array, because search settings has this search results parameter, search result 0, and we were looping through it before to display the info for each of them, but right now we only want to use index 0 of search results because we're only dealing with one session. In the next episode, when we go over those multiple sessions, we will of course need to know what specific session we're joining, but again, this is base level for joining. And because of that, we need to add an if statement and make sure that the if search settings search results.num is greater than 0 before trying to join a session. Because if search results.num is less than or equal to 0, that means we don't have any matches we can join and we don't want to attempt to join one. We probably want to display a message to the user saying there are no matches found. So after we add this if statement, at this point I added some logs, that way we can test this out. Because even though we're joining the session successfully in today's episode, we still won't be able to see anything. Even once the sessions are connected, we have to travel the characters or the players to a room together or to a level together, and we need to do a lot more. We have to remove widgets, we have to make them possess pawns. And so if we don't log things, we won't know that our behavior is working as intended. So logs are really important here. So I have my gengine add on-screen debug message log. We have our index of 0 for the key. We have our duration, which is 30 seconds. I made the color fcolor : cyan. And for the text, I made it fstring : printf text joining session. Now additionally, I've gone ahead and added a UE log for this as well. Remember that finding the UE log is more difficult when we're running standalone, and we can't really get the results we want unless we run standalone. At least not when we're trying to run more than one instance on the same machine. And so that's why I'm using the gengine add-on screen debug message, but you can go ahead and add the UE log like I've done here if you want to have it in there. And so once you have some sort of indicator that this is working, we want to actually set up the handle, the delegate handle, to do what it is that it is meant to do. So the handles are meant to use the delegate to call functions. The delegate is bound to the join session completed function. So we want to tell the handle that we're ready to start listening for this delegate. So we're going to set join session completed handle equal to the online session interface arrow add on join session complete delegate underscore handle. Then we have to pass in our join session completed delegate. So now the handle will be ready to use this delegate, which will be great because then we can call join session completed. But after setting the handle and to actually trigger that delegate, of course we need to actually call join session, otherwise nothing is going to happen with it. We're never going to reach a point where the join session has completed if we don't call join session. So we use our online session interface, arrow, join session, and then we need to do what we did in host session to get the preferred unique net ID of the player. So asterisk local player, arrow, get preferred unique net ID. This is the player that's attempting to join the session. For the F name, we have to pass in the same name of the session that was used in host session because we hard coded it. So make sure you have the exact same name in there. For me, it is my game session. Then lastly, we need to determine the session that we're trying to join. And so I'm going to use search settings, arrow, search results, index 0. Just going to try and join the first one. Assuming one exists, let's try and join it. Now that's all we need to do for join session, but I'm actually going to move this local player creation that we had from earlier in this episode down to right before we use it. I just added it above where we set the handle because we don't really need to do it outside this if statement. We don't want to create it and then this if statement fails. There is no reason to have actually created it, so it's just cleaner this way in my opinion. Now we can scroll down and create the join session completed function. So to make it, we add void uBaseGame instance : join session completed, and the parameters are fname, and I called it session name, and then e on join session complete result : type, and I've called this one join result. And one quick thing in here, I should have added session name with this little underscore because that's usually what I do. Just forgot that one, so I'm cleaning that up. Now once we come in here, I have added another G-Engine add-on screen debug message with the same parameters, except the text is different. So fstring : printf, text, join result, %d. And for the parameter that I'm passing in, so what's going to replace %d here is join result as an integer 32 bits or 4 bytes. But the reason we cast it this way is because the join result is an enum value and it doesn't normally translate to string properly because enums are typically just integers with names. And so while you can convert this to a string, it is easier just to convert it to an integer, read the number or the value tied to that enum. Again, you can always right click on the enum and go to the definition. That's actually the namespace. The enum is called type. And we know this is 0, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So by passing this join result in, it will say join result and it will give us the ID of the enum, which we can then determine what happened at that point. And I did the same thing for the log, joining result, using the join result converted to an integer and then passed into this text. And that's the real result that we want to get from today's episode. We just want to make sure that we were able to join and get a result of 0, which is a success. That means we have done our job correctly, but I did want to also clear the handle so we don't forget in the next episode. So just like the search for sessions, we need to clear a handle when we no longer want to listen to it. And so to do this, we should get our online subsystem again, same way as we did in the previous function. iOnline subsystem pointer online subsystem and set it equal to iOnline system : get. If that is valid, we're going to go and get our online session interface using the iOnline session pointer, call it online session interface, use the online subsystem, and call the get session interface function. If this is valid, we can then finally use it to clean up handle. So online session interface, arrow, clear on join session complete delegate underscore handle. And we're going to pass it the handle that we want to clear, which is the join session completed handle. At this point, we were good to go as far as joining sessions are concerned. There was one little thing I wanted to adjust. So some people make delegates capital, and I was going back and forth on this. I think I'm going to make these lowercase, just like my variables. You don't have to do this. Just I always think of functions as capital, and I couldn't make up my mind. But after looking at it and going through this episode, I think I'm going to make all my delegates lowercase like this. And if you do that, just know you'll have to change your parameters to actually match this. Anyway, guys, that's all I got, so thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please subscribe and consider joining the YouTube membership, Patreon, or Discord subscriptions. Thank you guys so much for all the love and support. I'm so incredibly grateful that we have come this far in the series, and I really can't wait to see how far we go. If you had any issues with this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. I'd be happy to help you out. There's a link in the description. It is completely free. Like I said, guys, that's all I got. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.